All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second class of the Fiber Hemp Production Short Course. My name is Shannon McDonald, and I'm a research collaborator with UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils program. I am assisting Laura Sullivan with this course, and you can reach out to either of us if you have any questions. Our emails are on the slide there. And in case this is your first time joining us, I want to remind you that you can access class recordings, slides, and additional supporting materials for the course on the Extension Foundation course portal. Please scan the QR code to enroll or click the link that will be in the chat. There's also information about this in your welcome letter that you received upon registration. So we're excited to get into this discussion on planting and planting systems today. As a reminder, please put questions and comments in the chat, and there will be time at the end of class for a Q&A with Laura and our special guest, Steve Groff. And here's a look at what we have in store for us throughout the rest of the course. And as a reminder, one certified crop advisor credit can be earned each class session. And if you want to apply for CCA credits, we'll give more information about that at the end of the class. And of course, we want to thank our funder. This work is supported by the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative CARE Grant and the SUN Grant Program from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Now, let's get into the content of our class today with Laura.
Hello, everyone. Can you see the screen okay?
Yep.
Great. Welcome to the second module of the Fiber Hemp Production Short Course. My name is Laura Sullivan, and I will be your guide again today. The focus of today's class is planting and planting systems. Oops, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Oops. And it is indeed Tuesday, March 3rd in the year 2026. It's a full moon. It was also an eclipse this morning, if any of you saw it. Here is an agenda for what you can expect to learn today. We'll begin every class with our poll. Then we'll take a moment to review what we learned last week. After that, we'll move on to timing and risks, followed by a discussion on choosing and calculating seeding rate. From there, we'll move into planting equipment, planting depth and spacing. After that, we'll talk about scouting, flowering, and maturation. And then we have an incredible, not to be missed presentation by farmer and author Steve Groff about his no-till hemp farming system. And we're so lucky to finish the class with a Q&A where he will join us live. And I'm going to be mindful to leave plenty of time for that. So without further ado, here is our poll question. And I actually shared this in last week's class, so we'll see how many of you were paying attention. And the question is, what is the ideal stem diameter for artisanal textile grade hemp line fiber? Is it 7 millimeters, the diameter of a pencil, 24 millimeters, the diameter of a quarter, 43 millimeters, the diameter of a golf ball? Or is stem diameter not so important as long as it can withstand the weight of many branches? And just give you guys another minute there. Okay, I'm about to end the poll. And I'll share the results. Okay, so the answer is 7 millimeters. And just a note on the last option, we don't want our fiber hemp stems to branch because every branch is an interruption of the fiber in the stalk. So when growing for fiber, we prefer less branching. And this is why hemp is seeded so heavily so that the plants are all packed in and competing for sunlight rather than branching out laterally. Okay. So here's our module 1 recap. We learned all this last week. Hemp is cannabis with less than 3.3% THC. The main components of the hemp stock are bast and hurd. Hemp bast fiber can be further categorized into line and tow. All constituents of the hemp stock have value. Hemp is direct sown in spring, ideally after the last frost. Test and amend your soil before planting. Plant early to outcompete weeds. Variety selection is very important for end use and will vary depending on your latitude. And compliance is key to a successful grow, and a license must be obtained in advance of planting. I also wanted to tie up a few loose ends that I found in last week's chat. So the preferred pH for hemp is moderately acidic, so 6.5 to 6.8 pH would be considered ideal. And full sun is critical. Lodging can occur, especially in the case of high biomass and thin stem stands. We personally have not had a problem with lodging in season on the research farm, even though we can get really big wind on the Champlain Islands. But my friend Andrea, who's our farm partner in Danby, Vermont, did see lodging of her crop in her field, which was very rich with nitrogen and organic matter. It was actually her sheep pasture ahead of being a hemp plot for many years. And this photo is actually her very dense stand, which was plagued by some lodging after a severe rain in 2024. So I just wanted to give you guys that information. And before we really jump in here, I just want to reiterate something that I said last week, and that is there are many ways to grow hemp. And in this class, we want to expose you to several of the pathways to success so that we can stand on the shoulders of all the hemp giants who have come before us. So I'm going to talk to you in a straightforward way about what we do and what has worked for us on our research scale. And then I'm going to introduce you to others who have approached it differently and commercially. And all of this is for your benefit. And my hope is that you will come to understand how flexible this crop is as you contemplate what kind of cropping system might meet your specific goals and the needs of your land base. So that said, moving on to the contents of our slide, make sure that you order your seed from January to March. Preparedness is best done in advance, as they say, and you don't want your planting date to be at the behest of your seed's arrival. So in other words, try your best to put a nice buffer of time between your seed arriving and your planting date. It might be traveling from overseas to reach you. It might be caught up in customs, and seed is in really high demand. So for all reasons aforementioned, make sure you prioritize ordering your seed. These are some of the companies that we love and have worked with over the years, and all of their websites have been included in the course resources for you. So planting, timing, and risk. In the Northeast, planting typically occurs in late May or early June. And in my experience on the 49th parallel of Alburgh, Vermont, over the past 5 years, we have successfully planted as early as May 20th and as late as June 6th for fiber hemp. In the years that we've been able to plant on the earlier side, we have experienced less weed pressure than in years where we planted later. Another climatic marker of planting time is when the air temperature has stabilized in the range of 46 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And I included a table from last season's weather data to show what that looks like. But that said, hemp can weather a light ground frost, but it would be best to aim for planting after the last frost of the season. And one more thing to consider when planting that I mentioned in the last class is that birds love hemp seed. So you might find the birds following after your seeder. And as a precaution, we coat our seeds in a non-lethal bird repellent derived from knotweed. But make sure you check the compliance laws in your area before spraying or applying any pesticide or herbicide. And to be honest with you, sometimes we forget to do this and it still turns out okay. And then once you've got your crop in the ground, Seeds can be expected to germinate in 3 to 10 days. You're going to want to scout your crop for emergence sometime between 10 days and 2 weeks after planting to make sure that you're getting the stands that you desire, or if replanting is necessary. On the research farm, we scout for emergence by taking a ruler or something that we know is 12 inches long and throwing it into the plot a couple times at random. We'll then count all of the plants in that foot-long section of a row, and from there we extrapolate the initial populations of the stands. Okay, so for the second bullet point, I have a story for you. In 2025, we planted earlier than any of the previous 4 years. And you can see our 4 previous planting dates in the table below. And in 2025, we were very proud of ourselves for getting everything together and all the seed packeted for this earlier planting date. But then, as seen in the table on the right, it rained for 4 days and nothing germinated except in one spot on the farm. And this could have been the combined result of clay soil crusting over after rain, or rain causing the seedlings to disease or rot. And despite the fact that it was randomly 80 degrees on May 16th, these conditions were just not conducive to our trials sprouting. And when enough time had passed, we had to make the call to replant the trials, and they were replanted on June 4th. And I did notice that we had both increased weed pressure in 2025, as well as decreased yields as compared to the year prior. And I would attribute both of those things to planting later. Planting later not only exacerbates the weed concern, which we've talked a lot about, but it also shortens your growing window, which we also talked a lot about, because remember, these plants will likely notice when the solstice comes and the days start shortening. So the takeaway is plant early if you can, but not into clay soil before a 4-day rain event. Okay, so now let's rewind and talk about seeding rate, which is a very important topic. When calculating seeding rate, the very first question to ask yourself is, what is my end use market? As this question will inform both your variety selection and your seeding rate. And even within the realm of fiber hemp, that number can vary greatly, whether it's industrial hemp for cottonizing, or growing long fiber, or growing for building materials. So speak with your processors and buyers and reach a consensus before sowing seed. It's possible that as processing facilities come online, they will have their own set of criteria and expectations, and it's important to have those conversations up front. So after that, you'll need to know 2 things about your hemp seed in order to increase the accuracy of your seeding rate. And those are 1,000 kernel weight, or TKW, and germination rate. Often this information is included on the hemp seed bag tag, but if not, I will just share with you how to solve for those. Okay, so starting with germination rate, you're going to count out 100 seeds and place them on a damp cloth in a Ziploc bag or Petri dish, somewhere where the temperature will stay above 50 degrees. After about 5 to 7 days, observe how many seeds did not germinate, and this number, when subtracted from 100, is your new germination rate. So for example, if 5 seeds did not germinate after 7, was 95%. The 1,000 kernel weight, or TKW, is an important one because, as you can see from this picture on the right, hemp seed size can vary. So if you were to plant 50 pounds of Felina and 50 pounds of Yuma, your Felina plot would have 3 times as many plants. So to find 1,000 kernel weight, there's really no way around it. You have to count out 1,000 seeds and weigh them. And I find that it's easy to do in 100 seed increments, but hopefully this information is included for you to save you some time. And as was stated previously, choosing a seeding rate will be informed by the end use. So fiber hemp can be sown anywhere from around 20 to upwards of 80 pounds per acre. Lower seeding rates increase biomass yields because they will make bigger plants, and higher seeding rates are reserved for artisanal longline textile production, with the idea being to crowd the plants in like sardines so that they form a more flax-like and dainty architecture with minimal room for branching. And I'll also add that hemp grown for seed is usually sown at a lower rate than fiber, between 20 and 30 pounds per acre. And just this past December, I&D Hemp, which is a big hemp seed company in Montana, successfully produced a cottonized hemp cotton blended shirt from the spent stalks of their grain hemp. And this would be called dual purpose hemp farming. Okay, so now we'll walk through the equations on the right. In addition to speaking in pounds per acre, a lot of people conceptualize their hemp crop as a number of live seeds per acre. So if you have this number in mind as a goal, you can calculate an accurate seeding rate to reach it. So for example, if your goal was 1 million live seeds per acre, your germination rate was 90, and your 1,000 kernel weight was 19.28 grams, you would multiply 1 million by 19.28 and divide that number by 1,000 to get 19,280 grams of seed per acre. Then you would want to factor in the germination rate. So you take the number you got and divide it by germination rate over 100 to get 21,422.2 grams of seed per acre. And then to convert that to pounds, you would take 21,422.2 divided by 453.6 to get 47.2 pounds per acre of seed in this scenario. Okay, and I've included this slide to demystify seeding rate a little bit for you. This is something you're going to want to do your research on. Again, talk with your buyers and processors and see what other folks in the industry are doing that you would like to emulate. I'm pretty sure that I've asked all of our guest speakers what seeding rates they prefer, so we can get a feel for how seeding rate matches up with end use here in class. So the recommended fiber seeding rates are anywhere from 200 to 750 live plants per meter squared. And just for example, for reference, 1 million plants per acre is 247 plants per meter squared. So it's actually kind of on the lower end. Recommended dual purpose seeding rate is about 120 live plants per meter squared, which would be about 21 pounds per acre of seed. I'm saying about because you have to remember factoring in 1,000 kernel weight and germination rate will change that a little bit. And our standard rate on the research farm is 450 live plants per meter squared, or 80 pounds per acre, or 90 kilograms per hectare of seed. And I'll also just tell you that we have a whole seeding rate trial that we've been doing for 3 years now. And we've done everything from 20 to 150 pounds per acre of seeding rates. Oh, I didn't show you this, but here's a little video just to see the glorious hemp. Okay, a couple more important planting specifications for you. Planting depth for fiber hemp is about 0.5 to 1.5 inches. Shallower planting can lead to increased bird predation, and deeper planting should be utilized in drier soils. Planting too deep can result in poor germination, but if all goes according to plan, germination can be expected to occur in 3 to 10 days. Row spacing for fiber hemp is 2 to 7 inches. Planting hemp densely in rows does not always maximize the space in the planting area, however. It is more ideal to have a consistent amount of free space around each seed or plant. So what does that mean? In the US, we are beholden to the equipment we have available to us. And oftentimes that means a seeder that plants in 7-inch rows. But you're not necessarily making the most of your seed bed if you utilize a very high seeding rate and then proceed to pack all those seeds into densely packed rows with 7 vacant inches between them. This is likely a cause of self-thinning, which will occur in a fiber hemp crop over the course of the vegetative stage. And this is something we see on the research farm every year. And it's actually something I think most other researchers will have come across as well. And here is what I mean by that. So this graph comes from our most recent 2025 variety trial. And this is my best guess at why establishment populations are generally higher than harvest populations. But it could also be the result of varieties germinating unevenly and earlier plants effectively closing the canopy and crowding out later smaller plants, which Steve is going to talk to us more about. But all of that said, the data is still nascent on what impact row spacing by seeding rate has on a hemp crop. We do not have all the answers, but I will say that most growers in China who have been growing hemp uninterrupted for centuries utilize a 4-inch or 10-centimeter row spacing. On the research farm, we seed all of our hemp trials with one of 2 kinds of seeders. We use either a Kverneland air seeder, somewhat similar to the picture on the left, or a cone seeder, which is shown in the middle picture. A Brilliant seeder is also a good option. And on a smaller scale, a Jang seeder can work well. And I'll just also mention that good seed to soil contact is also important when planting hemp. And if everything goes according to plan, in only about 2 to 3 months time, you can see your crop go from the seedlings on the left to the full-blown forest on the right. Oops. Okay, so once your crop has established itself, you're going to want to scout it. And we mentioned in the last class that fiber hemp is not particularly vulnerable to pests and disease in the Northeast, but it's still important to scout your fields and make observations about anything prevalent or unusual. If you find something that's unfamiliar to you, you can send specimens to the UVM Plant Diagnostic Clinic. We have included the link to the lab in your course resources. And this is where you can send anything, whether it's a pest like a borer in the stem, a disease that's unfamiliar to you, or a weed that you have never seen before. And I just encourage you to do so because your finding might help alert other farmers to something that is new or emergent in our area. So please take advantage of our resources for the greater good. And you're also going to want to be out in your field scouting for flowering or maturation. Male and female hemp flowers mature at different times, with male flowers expressing usually 2 weeks earlier than their female counterparts. Harvest timing will depend on end use. Fiber grown for high quality textile spinning might be harvested before any of the plants have expressed their sexes, as this is when the crop will be the most uniform and consistent. Others may wait until the end of winter to harvest their crop, but we'll talk more about that in the next class. And flowering is going to be the first signal you receive pertaining to harvest timing. We're not going to talk about harvesting this week, but I just included this slide because it's important that you're out looking for the first signs of flowers in your crop, and it can happen sooner than you would think. And in a moment, we'll hear from Steve Groff. Steve is a farmer, author, consultant, and speaker known internationally for his work in cover crops and no-till agriculture. He's also a native to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He has a history of innovating and pioneering in the area of environmentally healthy farming practices. He designed the first roller crimper in North America that makes cover cropping practical and effective. And he's joining us today to talk about his work and experience in no-till hemp farming.
Can everyone see the video okay?
Yes.
Woohoo.
Well, hello, everyone. Good to have you here today. We're talking about hemp, unlocking the secrets to growing regenerative hemp. And I've been doing this for a while now, but I do really appreciate this opportunity, and kudos to Laura, who made this little hemp bracelet out of hemp fibers at my farm while she was here at a field day. That's coming up on a year and a half ago now. So, Laura, thank you so much. That's really cool. It's a great souvenir. So, I just wanted to give you a shout out on that. So, a little bit about our farm. We have been growing hemp for 6 years now, about 50 to 70 acres each year. And that is fiber hemp, strictly fiber hemp. We're at a 40-degree latitude, which is important to know when we're talking about growing hemp. Average rainfall is 42 inches, and it's averages out according to historically, it's every month is about the same. It never happens that way. But just to give you a concept, we have a decent amount of rain here, but we do get our dry spells, we get our wet spells. We've been 100% no-till and using cover crops since 1996, and I'm certified Tier 5 by Regenified. Feel free to look up what Regenified is, but I'm the first hemp farmer to be certified by Regenified, so that's kind of cool. But I also grow some vegetables as well. So I'm also designing hemp harvesting equipment. And it's a big need out there. Not all hay equipment can just be used to harvest and work with hemp. So I'm working on that. You'll see a little bit of that toward the end of my presentation. Currently, and I got to say this for better or for worse, I'm looking out my window right now at 1 million pounds of hemp that are here stored on my farm. And that's from 23, 24, and 25. And a lot of that is a result of, going to be honest here, broken promises, unfulfilled contracts. And I will take some responsibility myself. Some of our equipment that we're designing, developing, took a little longer than we thought. So instead of getting it processed here on the farm, it didn't get done yet. So I'm sure some of you can relate to this, but it is a little frustrating. And I'd be remiss if I wouldn't acknowledge that as of right now, here at the beginning of 26, we've kind of like are just trying to find ourselves again, I feel, and in the whole hemp industry. I like to use the expression, the cars are built, but the roads are not made yet. That seems to typify the hemp industry. We need to get the supply chain going, and it's really processing is a bottleneck. And one of the main reasons for that is lack of capital, lack of funding. It just seems very difficult for investors to take beyond their enthusiasm and then to actually provide money for this. Because I think we all agree hemp is not a quick payback. And so investors have not been really eager to invest in hemp. And there's still a lot of stigma around it and its association with marijuana. So our job here is those of us in the hemp industry, we got to continue to educate people. And my goal is that I think we'll have made it when hemp becomes as boring as corn. So that's the goal anyway for right now. A few other things that I have learned, and I'm just going to be really general here. The first one I have there is practical experience for each farmer outweighs scientific information they may run across. Now, I'm going to be the first to tell you, I'm not bashing University of Vermont, Cornell, NC State, those here I'm more familiar with at all. I look at all their data they come out, but I will tell you that just because it works somewhere, someplace, at some time, in some year, does not mean it will work on your farm. So I think that's key here. We use all this information, and if it seems plausible, you try it and see what really works. The second one here is, and I'm sure we've all seen this, but I see people posting sometimes online, and I read these articles, hemp doesn't need any fertilizer, no weed control measures. It's going to thrive in drought. It's resistant to all kinds of diseases and insects. Well, it sort of is, but not. You just can't throw hemp seeds out in any ground. I mean, if you have good soil that grows good cash crops, hemp is going to flourish. But I've also seen people who think that you can plant hemp seeds on marginal ground and it's going to do all these wonderful things that you hear about. Probably not so. So I just put that out there as kind of a farmer check, if you will, that, yes, indeed, hemp is very good at all these things, but there's still some attention that needs to be paid to that. And we're going to talk about that a bit later. Another thing is I learned is you can plant earlier than you thought. Plant early if you want these big yields you hear about, but you can also plant very late. And when I say plant early, I know we come from different parts of the country, but I think the best advice I can give, if you have anybody plant spring oats in your area, that's the time to plant hemp. Here in southeastern Pennsylvania, where I am from, that would be anytime in March that you can get on the ground, which is a lot earlier than people thought. I had some Ukrainian farmers once tell me that they start planting when the soil temperature hits 45 degrees. And I'm like, are you sure? And we did a conversion from Celsius and like, yep, that's when we start. Well, I had noticed in my fields, I had volunteer hemp growing very early in March. And I thought, well, if that grows there, I might as well try it. So I literally have planted hemp in December. I planted it in February. I planted March, April, and all the way into August. I planted hemp more than half the months of the year. And I will tell you, the one in December, it grew. This was 2 years ago, till about January, and then it froze out. The one in February, a little early. The one in March is fine. And I'm confident here in southeastern Pennsylvania, we're going to start planting, not all of our acres. We are going to start planting a field or two in March, or as soon as we can get in the ground. It is amazing how quickly that will come up. And this is in the context of my system, though. I'm going to talk about it here in a second. So bear that in mind. The other thing is it's very difficult to get even emergence. If you're a corn farmer, you would know that you want your corn seedlings to come up within 36, 48 hours. That's ideal. And then they're all growing together. In hemp, due to genetics, I'll say poor genetics sometimes, and due to poor planters, it's difficult to get all the hemp seedlings to get up within 48 hours out of the ground. And I'm going to talk about that a bit later as well. But having said that, once you get hemp to 6 inches in height, that's my opinion, 90% of the growing process and management is achieved. So that's a good thing. Once you get it going, it grows very well. So what are some of these secrets? What's the secrets to success here? I'm going to say the first thing is to plan a full year in advance, if you can. That's ideal. Because to set yourself up for success, that is important. Understand that soil biology management, see how I have that capitalized there, management, soil biology management. Management, that means you're the manager, how you manage the soil biology, and you have a role in that. Nature does a lot, but we have a role in management. It's very important. And I'm not going to get into specifics today about that, but I want to mention that is important to do what I'm about to tell you to do, and actually is some of the secrets, if you will, for success. Also, and I alluded to this earlier, understand that weeds can and will compete with hemp. Everyone that has grown hemp has had sections or parts of fields or whole fields that have been weedy. There's ways around that. Planting early is one. But the other thing is understanding fertility management in your fields. My fields look different than anyone else, vice versa. You have to understand that farmers who have grown cash crops start to get dialed in about how much nitrogen their corn needs for optimum production. Same thing for hemp. And I will say, as a rule of thumb, anybody starting out, if you know what you're using for corn for nitrogen, hemp is roughly 75% of nitrogen of that. Seems to be a common understanding and agreement to that among farmers who are cash crop farmers and also have grown hemp. So that might be a starting place. And then you need field tested. Again, that's highlighted there. Field tested no-till and cover crop and harvesting equipment. So all the hemp equipment that you deal with, it's all out there to a degree. But I would envision in 10 years from now, there will be a whole lineup of hemp equipment from seed to harvest that is going to be hemp specific. We have a few of them now. We have the Bish 4-bar cutter. We have the Lemetris KP4 out there. They're made specifically for hemp, but I see more of them develop in the coming years ahead. This is a picture of my farm, and this is where we did variety testing. And I like to tell people this is not 10 by 10 plots. This is 1,500 feet long on field length, farmer, farmer managed and everything. So we like to do it in a way that we can get solid data and solid understanding of what's going on out there. So I just wanted to show you the visual here that we have been doing this several years, just to get a handle on what works best. And I have to say this again, in our context. So talking a little bit here about regenerative, I'm going to shift gears just a tad. We've probably all heard the term regenerative, and there's no single sentence that everybody agrees on what it is. But these are the basics of it: using cover crops, limiting soil disturbance. Use the word limit there because, I'm a no-till farmer, but I don't want to say that that's the best for every situation. It's the best for me, but limit soil disturbance, diversify your plant species in your rotation, living roots year-round, soil is covered year-round, and all of this is centered around your context. What is your experience? And what is your ability to manage? So, in a sense, everyone is going to look different. But if I could boil it down, simple principles, we're trying to mimic nature as much as possible. That's really what we're trying to do here. And again, in the context of what we do, I like to say that I don't blame my grandpa for farming the way he did, but there's no way that would be acceptable today. I also challenge myself, what will we look at 20 years from now and look back at 2026 and say, I can't believe we did that. So, we evolve, we move forward, we learn, everyone has a context. But this is a picture here of really what I'm talking about in what we're looking at. Soil covered with living roots year-round. This is hemp that was planted into a cover crop. You're going to see that in a second. And it's just beautiful green coming out of the dead residues that were living there just a short time before. So keeping the soil covered, living roots, diversity really happens in the cover crops. So just love that picture right there. So getting a little bit down to the nuts and bolts here, strategic planning a year in advance. You might want to think about your cover crop that you're planting, or said that wrong, sorry. You might want to think about your cash crop that will be harvested in time to plant a cover crop. Some farmers, they want to get their cover crops planted a little earlier. They'll plant a shorter season corn or shorter season soybean. Or after wheat, for instance, there's plenty of time to plant a multi-species cover crop that will grow in the fall. Now, sometimes that's going to winter kill. If depends on your region, sometimes they'll survive the winter. Neither are right or wrong. It just depends what you're trying to do. When we look, here's an illustration of a late summer multi-species, 12 species in there, them sunflowers and the rest, planted in late summer after wheat. By fall, it's growing up nice, 3 feet tall, it's beautiful, but then over the winter, it freezes, and there you can see some of the remains of the totally radish, and everything is dead. That's one way to do it. That's really nice to plant hemp into, by the way. That's the easiest way. A harder way, as you see in this picture, is maybe a later planted cover crop, and it's still green. You want to maximize it. It does not winter kill. and you leave it grow until it's time to plant hemp. This happens to be in the 3rd week of May here. This is indeed planting hemp. Not a stage picture. We're actually planting hemp. Actually, that previous picture you saw of our test plots, this was planting that test plot. So this is planting hemp with a no-till drill into green cover crops. And it's not for the faint of heart. If you don't have the right tools, I'm going to bluntly say you can't do this. You have to have the right tools. The roller crimper that you saw there is the first one made in the United States. I built that in 1996. And there's been many versions of that come out since. And it's well used everywhere. But for hemp, I'm showing you that it can be done, but this requires a high level of expertise and a high level of very, very, very good equipment. I have a picture or video here in slow motion of our 15-inch planter planting hemp, by the way. Very, very aggressive, I will say, in cleaning the row off, but not too much. And we get the seeds planted in the ground there. And there's a lot of specialized equipment on this to make it work. And I'm telling you, it does work. But again, I have to throw the disclaimers out there. You've got to have the right equipment to have the little hemp seed come up out of that. That's quite the process. Also, this is using a drill, a 7.5-inch drill. This is, like I said, once it's 6-8 inches high like this, if you got a good stand and you beat the weeds by this time, 90% of your work is done. One of the principles is to keep the soil covered. And this is really what I love to see. This is the picture after the hemp has been harvested, and you can still see my cover crop on the ground. The soil is still covered because I had a mature cover crop that is still covering the ground, providing earthworm food and food for all the little critters down there. Now I want to switch over to planting. I made this little diagram by putting hemp seeds out on a table. If we could broadcast hemp, that would be ideal, to have equal distance spacing of the hemp seeds. Not practical in my system of no-till. And I've heard people have tried it, and it's probably not recommended practice anyway. That middle one there, I say dribbled. I use that term tongue in cheek. That's what like a drill would put out, because most drills are made for planting wheat, which it doesn't matter if wheat seeds are bunched together. If there's a 2 or 3 inch space, they'll tiller out and fill it in. Hemp, on the other hand, is more like corn. And as you'll see in a picture here coming up, ideally we'd like them precisely spaced, precisely the same distance in the row. And that's the bottom. I call that precision, where we literally singulate the seeds going down each row. That is what we want to do ideally. And we are building a planter this winter that is going to singulate the seeds. It's going to be a 4-inch row width, of course, for setup for no-till. And that way we'll have much more precise planting, because we need to keep the seeds, evenly distanced is the best. Now, I have a picture here just to provide an example of a couple things. You see the red arrows. First of all, you see the distance it's what I'm talking about. It's not equal distance. Ideally, they'd be equal distance. But the red arrows is what came up first. They're the winners. They're the winners of the race to the top, the race to sunlight. And you can see they're nice even stalks there. I'm thinking the yellow one came up a day or two later, and the green arrow came up a couple days after that. What I plan to do this coming year is to plant the seeds, and then I want to put a flag by the first day they come up, on a row length or a certain segment of row, and I want to put another color flag the next day for a couple days, and then just watch how they grow. And maybe some of you have done that, but I just think that's important. So seed placement is important, but actually even emergence is more important. And that goes back to seed genetics, but also to planting. So why 4-inch rows? That's because that's where the people who have been growing hemp the longest, that's what they do. 10 centimeters. China, a lot of in Europe. In Europe, they like flax in 4 or 5-inch rows. So they have their seeders, they just put hemp in and go. This is a picture when I was in China. A year ago, this is one of their drills they use to plant hemp. Notice how close it is, 4 centimeters. Excuse me, sorry, 10 centimeters, 4 inches. So for this year, we're building this planter with a 4-inch row spacing, precision singulation of seed for each row, heavy duty no-till seed row openers. But we're really looking also for even emergence, planting depth and consistency, and getting good quality seeds. There's a lot to be done yet in seed quality. And that starts with the growers when they grow the seed, how they handle it, all that stuff. I really hope someone embraces that and does a good job on the seed genetics. So that's one of the things that's coming up. And this is really what we're looking for here, a nice tabletop stand of hemp. So, it looks like a cornfield does. Everything's even. As you're well aware, a lot of varieties, you'll see there's some stalks are 2 to 3 feet taller than other stalks. And there's different reasons for that. But when we get this industry dialed in, we got to get better genetics. We got to get better planting in order to make it very, very viable. I want to talk just a second about weed control here. As I said, getting planted earlier, beating the weeds is one method. But once hemp, if they beat the weeds out, once it gets 6 inches tall, very few weeds will compete with it. But to get to that point sometimes can be very difficult. There's a few things, obviously, low weed pressure in the field. Sometimes we can't always do that. Plant hemp early. Here in my area, lamb squirters, which is the big one for hemp, you don't want that. Lamb squirter or pigweed will grow about as tall as hemp. Trust me, I know. It's happened in my farm. So that germinates the 3rd week of April and the 1st week of May for pigweed. So if we can get it, this is a reason to get it in the ground a couple weeks ahead of that. Not that it grows a lot, but if the hemp can beat it by a week, that's a lot in the context of growing and out competing the weeds. Proven genetics, I've harped on that a lot. Higher plant density. We're up to, sometimes 1.2, 1.5 million seeds per acre. But for the grain folks, they're down to 300,000-400,000. I'm saying when you get below 500,000 seeds per acre, weed control becomes a lot bigger issue. So just something to know. Closer row spacing. That's one of the reasons, too, why we're going with 4 inches. I will say, too, there is a limited options for herbicides out there. I think that'll expand in the future for those who use herbicides. But when we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of acres, which we want, there's going to have to be some broad scale herbicides used where needed, at least until we find a way to eliminate that. But I'm just saying, as a farmer right now, and thousands of acres, we're probably going to rely on herbicides for a time being. Yeah, I wanted to give you a sneak peek. It's actually not much of a peek, but of some equipment we're building. This is in some of our 16-foot high hemp this year. I just can't show you the whole machine yet, but you can see it is mounted on the back of a tractor. We're in production of that for this year. We're going to make one commercial unit because the prototype has been designed. This would be for smaller farmers like myself. So you can look forward to more information on that. Probably a bigger thing is our in-field decortication. This is actually our second version here where we're actually decorticating the hemp in the field. You can't see a lot here, but anyway, it's something that we're working on here in trying to get that developed. It's going to end in 10 minutes, and I can't get it off. So the fiber gets put out on the ground, and the herd gets blown in that wagon. That's simply what it is. Now we're farther along in this. We hope our first commercial unit is going to be produced in 26. We hope to have these available for sale in 27. But if those interested in this want to contact me, my email's at the end here if you're interested in more information about this. But it's pretty exciting. There's a demand for long green fiber, and we think we're getting close to getting that done. Also, there's still a lot of people who like to test in small scale. I'm putting this in here because I have a local Amishman here. The Amish were trying to figure out how to see if they could grow fiber. I said, I don't know if fiber hemp is applicable to Amish, but they built this little decorticator here. It's pretty cool. I've tried it. I've used it. It works. But I just put it out there. He's making them on an as-needed basis. But this is great for those of you who are testing want to test different varieties or whatever. So I just wanted to put it out there. So to wrap it up, I've shared with you some of my secrets, I guess I'll say, but I think it's important that we as an industry really stick together here now. As we know, it's still very, very nascent, very new, and there's a lot yet to build this supply chain, to build the processing and everything. So I'm going to help anybody I can with where they're at, but I ask the question, what's your secrets? What have you found to work on your situation? So I say all this to say, let's work together. All ships rise with the tide. We can compete later. We're not at the McDonald's Burger King stage or the Coke Pepsi stage where it's just all in marketing. We just need to survive. So that's kind of my challenge to all of us here. And if you want to get in touch with me, my email's there, simply steve@stevegroff.com. But I thank you so much for this opportunity, and all the best in 26 for everyone.
That was so awesome, Steve. Thank you so much for that. And we do have a couple of questions lined up here. So someone asks, our soil never goes under 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Does that mean we can plant anytime and all year round? Or do you need at least 12 hours of daylight?
Well, regarding the soil temperature, that should probably work for most varieties. And again, as I listened to this, as recorded a couple of weeks ago, I'm thinking, well, I should have said this, I should have said that. But there is a key here that I am using varieties that are known to be good germinators. So, and it goes back also to the quality of seed, and I think that was mentioned by Laura earlier. And so this is really important. I am not as familiar with growing hemp in the tropics, and I'm assuming that's where this question's coming from, or at least in very low latitude conditions. So I would base it a little bit more on what are other typical cash crops growing, what part of the season. So a little hard for me to give specific advice there. And I know there's other people who are growing hemp in the tropical regions, but that would be my advice, to go on what other typical cash crops, if it's corn or, kind of crops that are kind of a similar life cycle, annual crops, something like that. That's what I would go on.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I won't respond to the soil temperature one, but for the hours of daylight, the plants will flower quite small if there's not ample daylight, because we experienced that doing like a really late planting in August, and our crop was maybe just like 2 feet tall and started flowering. And that was one of our like workhorse varieties, Futura 83, which is French and usually is big and majestic. So it will definitely respond to the daylight. Another question is asking about how the high level of cover crop residue, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, that's when the cover crop dies and stays on the surface of the soil, covering the soil. We call that residue. So how does that influence redding and harvest strategies?
This is a very good question. And this is why I mentioned that, and I'll just say in 10 years, we'll have a better lineup of equipment. So the redding process, I don't feel is changed very much, but it's the raking or the subsequent, in the redding, if you have to turn it once, are you going to be picking up the residue that's on there and mixing it in with the hemp? That's not good for most applications. Maybe if you're doing biochar or something, that wouldn't matter. You don't want debris in your hemp. So getting a proper rake, merger, pickup, that's actually something else we're working on that won't do that. So we've tried mergers, which in the context of hay equipment is simply like a pickup that's on a baler, but it's the whole width and you can move it around that way. That way you're not sweeping to the side like a lot of rakes do. And that's one method. But I'll tell you that we tried 3 mergers, and they all kind of worked, but they're not built big enough for the hemp stalks that we have. So there needs to be some work on that as well.
Great, thank you so much for that. And someone is asking, Steve, what drew you to pursue certification by Regenified rather than other third parties?
So there's other parties out there that are certifying regenerative agriculture, and I'm happy for every one of them because I think it's helpful right now. And first of all, in a broad general sense, I wasn't really desiring certification at first, and I mainly did it, and I have to say this in the context of this conversation today, I mainly did it for my vegetable portion of business. I get a lot more traction on that side of it. Right now, if you're regenerative, if you're organic, or you're conventional, it doesn't seem to make a lot of difference at the current status that we're at in the hemp production. So I will say, though, the reason I went with Regenified is I know the founders of it, Gabe Brown and so forth. I knew it was coming, and so I was a part of some of the process to get it developed and so forth. So for me, it was somewhat of a natural fit. So I'm happy for any third party that comes on board as long as they don't greenwash. That is something that I'm very, very cognizant of, and I think we all should be aware of, that we want to make sure anybody that's certifying or says they're regenerative or whatever they're claiming, that they're actually doing what they say.
Indeed. Okay, so someone asks, if I have a few hemp seeds, can I guess by their appearance whether they're going to give me male or female flowers? And the answer to that question is no. You wouldn't know from looking at the seed whether it's male or female. But if you had a monoecious variety, which means that the male and female flowers are on the same plant, it would likely be both. Because in those crops, females, they can be like 50% female, 50% monoecious, but usually most of the plants are monoecious. So that's the only case where you could make like an educated guess about whether the plant would be male or female. And in the case of the dioecious varieties where they're separate, usually that's about 10% males and 90% females. So those are other guesses you could make, but nothing in the way that the seed looks would hint at one or the other. And then someone asked, what would be some examples of greenwashing in regenerative certifications?
So one thing that regenerative is big on is soil, less disturbance in the soil, and the use of cover crops. Well, that's really subjective because there can be a whole gamut. And what Regenified does, and I'll have to use Regenified, is you don't check the box that you use cover crops or you use less tillage. You have to define what is used in your total acres. So if you check the box, if you say you're using cover crops, then you follow up what percentage of your fields are in cover crops. And then another continued follow-up is what percentage of the year are living roots in the soil. So if you follow what I'm saying there, if someone says, I threw out a cover crop seed in November, I plowed it in March, it grew 3 inches, that doesn't count. But they grew a cover crop. So that's an example that I would have there where it takes it beyond just a yes or no and it actually asks you to define it. And for Regenified, they come to my farm. I have a 200-acre farm. They spent 8 hours here going over my farm, and they do a lot of what we would call results-based, outcomes-based. They listen to the amount of birds they hear. They look and track how many insects they see, beneficials and even predators. So that's stuff you can't cheat on. You can't fake it. You earn that because you don't have diversity on a farm by just checking boxes in an office somewhere. So having that ground truth is very important in in any certification, regardless of what it is.
Thank you, Steve. And the next question I'm also going to let you answer. Is there any demand for seed production in the United States?
Absolutely, yes. And I think because we haven't had it done here for over 80 years, we're just catching up. Now, you would think that would be easy. There's two big challenges that I see. A lot of the varieties that I happen to like are long season and they're too long to be grown here at the 40-degree latitude. They need to be grown at the 20, 25, 30-degree latitude, which is southern US. Well, then you look across the southern US, the good growing regions are very usually typically expensive vegetable growing areas and expensive high-end crops. Now, there's some exceptions to that, especially where they have irrigations. So this is something that's going to have to be developed. And the other thing is there's no real history of people growing hemp seeds. And hemp is sort of unique. It's not just like wheat or small grains. The seed is rather fragile, so you have to have someone that not only is in the right latitude, but they're in the right geographical area. When you think about United States, the majority of our seeds, our small seeds, and our lawn seeds are grown in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. That's because the weather there is perfect, or very ideal, I should say, to grow those seeds. It doesn't rain much over the summer. Here in my area, you heard me say 42 inches of rain. Now, we can have a very dry month of August. We can also have a very wet month of August. And wetness and dampness has a direct influence on seed quality. So you can grow some of the shorter season, especially the grain varieties. You can grow them in Canada, and you can actually grow them in the Mid Atlantic where I'm from, which is more humid. But year after year, the quality is not going to be as good as an area that's drier. And so all those factors enter in that to get the hemp industry up and running is kind of a big deal because we always hear the chicken and egg, chicken and egg, chicken and egg. Well, there's nobody going to invest in growing seed until they know there's a viable industry, at least at commercial scales. When I'm talking about millions of pounds of seeds that we're going to eventually leave. Those people who can do that, they're just waiting to see if this industry is going to mature or not. So that's my long-winded answer to yes, we need domestic seed production or here in the US or wherever you're from, because I see we have some international guests, in order to get something that is local, because the price of seed is the most expensive input we have. So that's another kind of a sidebar there to get to the point where we can grow seed that is commercially economically viable for farmers to make this whole thing work.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off Steve's answer and share that if you guys remember from the video that we showed last week of the Ursa Alta variety, a lot of the varieties we're interested in are these really long season varieties that won't even go to seed in our regions. So there's no way we can produce seed for them here. That would have to happen somewhere else. And just for our own seed security, it's really important to have a domestic supply of seed. We've seen that Europe has had iffy years with seeds, not only hemp, but also flax for the past couple of years. So it's become like increasingly more difficult to get seed. And when you get really comfortable and used to a variety that you use year after year, there's always that chance that the next year it won't be available. So it's really important to kind of diversify the places where we source our seeds from so that we're not ever caught without seed when we need to be. So yes, I also believe that a domestic seed supply is quite important. So someone asked, which is best to consider for planting, monoecious or dioecious varieties? Steve, do you have a preference there?
I really don't. I haven't been dialed in that much yet, at least for the work I'm doing. I would say, Laura, you're more of an expert on that, so I'm going to defer to you.
I don't really have a preference either. I like to grow both. But I think that there's an argument that could be made for maybe either. For example, in the dioecious varieties, when you have separated males and females, the stems are going to be less consistent. You'll see the males dry down earlier than the females, and then that can complicate harvest timing sometimes, because if you have a whole bunch of dry male plants, they could get gunked up in your combine or whatever. But it also might be a non-issue because a lot of people growing for fiber will harvest before there's flowers, because that's when all the plants will be the most consistent. So I don't think it's something the jury is still out on, and I don't have a definitive answer. And both seem to do okay. And there could be differences in yields as well if you're growing for grain, because if you have a dioecious crop, 10% are males, which means they have no seeds, aka no grain. So you're starting with like 90% of your crop right there. But yeah, I don't know if there's data on this. I think people in Europe take it more seriously. But we grow both, and it's never been a definitive answer of like one is better than the other. And so someone wrote, how deep can hemp plants can grow? How deep can hemp plants roots grow as compared to the above soil vegetative part?
I actually have an answer for that. That's we have dug them out 4 feet deep with the soil pit. So that's just my experience on my farm. And again, that was something that would have been 8 to 10 feet tall on the top in this situation. But that's going to vary your soil type and so forth. A lot of variables there, but they do grow deep. They can grow deep. And like they're known for, that's definitely a fact that they're good for the soil in that manner because they open it up. I'm not sure if I would rank them more aggressive than corn roots yet, and that's simply because I'm not sure, because corn roots can be pretty aggressive as well. But in the context of soybeans or anything like that, other commodity crops that people might grow, they're definitely going to go deeper than that. So that's one of the things, the benefits that hemp comes, and there is anecdotal evidence, and I'm assuming here coming up in the next couple years, there'll be more trials done and seeing the benefits of subsequent crop yields after hemp. When you go back into the old literature, for those of you who don't know, might be a little hard to find, but go back to the 1913 USDA, I think they called it a handbook or guidebook or something. There's 60 some pages in there dedicated to hemp. It's fascinating to read that. And some of these old articles, which I love to see what nuggets I can find, they indicate that hemp, the crop that was grown after hemp, seemed to do better. Now, sometimes what that means, I don't know, but I hear that pretty consistently. So I think there's something to be said there.
Anecdotally, my friend had good success growing flax after hemp, and she noticed there was a lot less weeds going on. So those could be related. Okay, so somebody asked, is there a reason that fiber hemp wouldn't make a great cover crop for soil improvement or harvesting for biomass, and then in parentheses, mulch? Is the seed cost prohibitively expensive for a non-cash crop use?
Well, I'll answer the second part first, and probably the seed cost would be prohibitive. That's number one. Number two is, if you're a no-till farmer like I am, and having to deal with hemp plants, even if they're relatively kind of immature, let's just say a fiber crop that's only 6 feet tall, that might have been planted later, there is still mature fibers in there. They will get caught up in my machinery later on, depending on what I have on the wheels, the planters, the closing, all that kind of stuff. So there would have to be a really good reason to use hemp as a cover crop for soil improving capabilities. I'm saying that's not its niche. So unless you have a really good reason to do that, I would say I would avoid that if I were you.
Thank you. Okay, so someone else asked, for mixed species winter-killed cover crop, can you recommend a tool/calculator for determining nutrient credits for hemp?
That's a great question because my former years ago, I had a cover crop business and we did literally thousands of research plots here on my farm. And some of them were very small, by the way. And we looked at that, trying to determine a nutrient value that we could give. And as you might guess, some things you think are easy to figure out. This is not, because what we saw was there's a lot of variability. You can take the exact cover crop mix on one farm and it will look different on another farm, even the way the species grow and when it was planted. I remember having in my drill like a 6 or 8 way cover crop mix. I used to grow sweet corn, and that would start coming off the middle of July. Every week, I planted cover crops for many weeks out of that same exact seed mix. By November, you would have thought it was a different ratio of seeds just because what came up at a certain time of the year. So that question only can be determined on your own farm if you do some trials. I forgot one other thing. What's the biology in your fields? Because when I say biology, I'm talking about all the life within the soil. We think of the earthworms maybe first of all. So if you have lots of earthworms that can immediately start chewing that residue up and turning it into nutrients, that's going to be different than a relatively dead soil that you're just starting out. And there's very little life there yet. It's just going to lay on the top. It won't provide many nutrients. So I'm just going to have to tell you that you don't really know until you do your own research. So what I did, and I did this because I wanted to know more for a broader folks that I was serving, was that I did different nitrogen rates or different fertility rates just to start to find out what works on my farm. Again, for most farmers, it's somewhat a pain and difficult to do. But if you're a larger farmer, if you have GPS and you have weigh wagons and yield monitors, you can do this kind of thing from the cab of your combine or your tractor. It's not that hard if you pay attention. If you're smaller, it's a little harder to do. So I wish I could have an answer for that question, but the answer will have to stay, it depends.
Great. So we have one last question here, and it is, are there trace mineral levels that are ideal, like selenium or copper or calcium? And this is from Nan. I happen to know she's in Maine. And she says, we live in one of those beastly low selenium deficient soil zones.
So personally, and I have to say that I rely more on sap testing, which is after the plant grows and you take tests. It's a fairly modern way. Some of you have probably heard about it, where they're testing the sap of a plant to see what the plant is actually getting from the soil. Soil testing is great. Tissue testing is good. But what is the plant actually getting? So if you have these, deficiencies that you're aware of, because I think the minerals that you mentioned aren't directly yield enhancing, but they're health enhancing. And they're both important. So to give you an answer without knowing a little bit more is a little difficult, other than if that's something you routinely have or short of, yes, you should be looking into supplement to try to get that going in your system. Sometimes the biology, and I speak that very generally, will waken up the microbes, right, that can make this stuff available that is previously unavailable. That's a whole topic right there. So I'll just leave it at that right now and say keep digging into that and try to identify what is really in your soils. I would at least go to some tissue testing. Everybody can do that. Sap testing is a little more expensive. That's a little bit more involved. But again, a little hard to give exact advice on that question.
Great. Well, you did a really good job. So thank you, Steve.
Pleasure.
And we'll just recap what we learned today. Order your seed from January to March. The earlier, the better. Plant early to avoid major weed issues. Avoid planting before major 4-day rain events. Scout your crop for emergence within 2 weeks of planting. When calculating seeding rate, the very first question to ask yourself is, what is my end use market? You'll need to know your germination rate and 1,000 kernel weight to get an accurate seeding rate. Planting depth is 0.5 to 1.5 inches. Row spacing for fiber hemp is 2 to 7 inches. If you find something unfamiliar, you can send specimens to the UVM Plant Diagnostic Clinic and get to know your crop by scouting for the first signs of flowering. Male flowers will be the first to express themselves, followed by females 1 to 2 weeks later. And thank you for attending class. We're looking forward to hearing from you all next week. And here's what to expect. We'll be talking about growing, harvesting, and redding. And those topics will be harvesting and harvest timing, redding and redding methods. And then we'll have a discussion on growing for building materials with Cody Lay, and a discussion on growing for a clothing brand with Maciek Kowalski. And then we will have our Q&A. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you all, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
I'm also just going to share about the CCA credits. If anyone wants to apply for a CCA credit from this class, just scan this QR code, or you can sign in using this information here to apply for it. I've also put my information in the chat and the information that you can email me if you're unable to sign it. And the course survey should show up when you exit the meeting, but if not, you can also click here or scan this QR code and let us know what you think and what you want to learn about, and we can try to figure that out for next time. All right, thanks everybody.
I have a question for you if you're there.
Yeah, sure.
My name doesn't show up on the list of people that are attending. I don't understand that. I'm getting the notifications that it's time for class and all that prior, but when it's time for class and I'm in class, it's not showing that I'm there.
I mean, I see your name here on the list, I believe. You might not see your own name, maybe.
That'd be cool.
Maybe, but
Okay.
we see you're here, so we can vouch for you that you were here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I see you on the list.
All right. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. I think we're all set.
Thanks,
Bye,
Shannon.
everybody. Thanks.